Happy New Year, everyone. I'm so excited that you are joining us for our very special season of Joyful Journeys. This year, Girls on the Run of Northern Virginia is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and we are commemorating this with a very special season of Joyful Journeys. Every other week, we will be highlighting someone from each year since our inception in 2000. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by four amazing women who have all held the title of Girls on the Run of Northern Virginia Executive Director. So I'd like to go around and ask you all to tell us your name, tell us when you were the executive director, and maybe give us kind of a brief highlight of your tenure as the executive director. Rebecca, why don't we start with you, since you were the first executive director, and then we can go around in order of directors.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rebecca Anderson, and yes, I was the first. Actually, in 1999, I read a blurb about Molly Barker, and it was just before I got married. And it took a little bit longer than almost a year before I got trained by Molly specifically, one-on-one. There was not very many people doing this at that time. And she said, okay, stamp of approval, go. And I started the whole thing from there out of my townhouse. My lower level was always filled with boxes of something. And so the whole mindset for me in 2000 and to 2005, or around that time when Jen came on board, was just growth. Get the name out there. Let's find more girls. Let's find more coaches. Let's find people to know who we are and help us spread this great word. And it kind of just, had to be the building blocks, right? So eventually I got it out of my townhouse, not before I had a baby and worked at home the whole first year of her life. So, yes, blessings to my Sophia, who was a very good baby. Otherwise, that would have never happened. But I'm sure Jen remembers all of it. Hi, it's so lovely to see you, Jen.
Years. This is so amazing.
So again, that's when we moved it into an office and, felt truly official, even though by then, I'd already felt like we were having some good growth. But that was my time.
Thanks, Rebecca. All right, Jen, so you were next. Tell us what happened. So Rebecca built these foundational blocks for you to then take over. I don't know, do you remember kind of, Rebecca, how many girls were participating at that point when you handed it over? Was it hundreds? Was it 50? Was it
I think we were in the hundreds.
Hundreds, awesome. And then Jen took over.
I think so. Yeah, a dozen schools, maybe 20 schools, but it wasn't
right.
It wasn't a ton. So I ended up buddy running. One of the very first coaches, I think, that Rebecca hired, Mary Delaney, who I'm still friends with. She asked me to buddy run, and it was one race, and then I was hooked. So I started coaching. I had a phenomenal team of coaches and group of girls at Taylor, many of whom I also still follow on Facebook, and they're all married and in their 20s, and it's just
right.
It's kind of crazy. Makes me feel very old. But, and then I think it was a right time, right place. So in my career, I was kind of looking for something different and new. And Rebecca, I remember you coming to a session at Taylor Elementary School and us talking, and it just felt like it went from there to, this is what I'm going to do for the next couple of years. And just like Rebecca said, there was so much growth and there was so much momentum at the time that it really just made it kind of an easy target of like, let's just keep growing this. And it was becoming a household name among girls and parents and in the elementary school community. And I think one of the things we tried to do, so I was ED until 2008, is try to expand that community of who's talking about Girls on the Run. It's not just if you're a parent of a girl. I wasn't married, had no children at the time, but tried to get, athletes involved in the community that could participate in any way that they could. And some still do. And it just kind of really making it more global, whereas we had become under Rebecca, and then we continued to be the largest council in the country. And there was so much exposure as a possibility for our council. And I think that's what we tried to do. So.
Wow, fantastic. So you really then exponentially continued to grow it. Sounds amazing. I meant to ask Rebecca, where was the office that you first opened?
I probably could give you directions from my house better than I can say the name of the office building.
Was it in Fairfax or
It was definitely in Fairfax.
That's all I needed to know. I was curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where we still are. So,
Well, right. I figured. And actually, I think they were in that building for a while. I think you moved offices within the building, but I think you stayed in the building for a while. I see heads nodding. So yeah, I'll let you tell that part. But yeah.
All righty. So we're in an office now, we're growing, and we go on to Catherine.
So 2009, 2014. And my background was marketing. And so sort of as Jen said, my focus was really on growing the organization, doing more marketing, getting more exposure. And we did that by partnering with folks. So we partnered with folks like Nova and George Mason and really used them to get the word out. So we grew pretty quickly, which was wonderful, except for the 5K, which became, we had 10,000 people at a couple of our 5Ks. So we spent a lot of time working on the logistics of the 5K. What I do remember is my very first week in that office building in Fairfax, I got a call in the middle of the night that the building was on fire. There was a huge fire in the building. And luckily it was on the other side, but we did have smoke damage in the office. So there was a bar there down on the lower level, and they had the fire. So here I am, one weekend going there in the middle of the night, having no idea what's happening. But luckily it wasn't, my reaction was bigger than the fire probably, but.
I think that is rightfully so. If you have all of our materials, all of the curriculum and all the supplies and t-shirts and medals that we all have in the office, I'd be pretty terrified too.
And I had barely settled into being like, the executive director. And here I'm like, I don't know what I do when I get there. I have no clue, but anyway, it was a great 5 years of lots of good partnership and good growth.
Okay. So now we're working on partnerships with Catherine. That's great. So that's really, taking the council to the next level. And then Katie, what happened during your tenure?
Yeah. So when I came in, so I was a 2014 to 2019, just a little over 5 years. And when I came in, like, when I think about sort of what I was focusing on was really around access. So I was really, frankly, like really like blessed to be able to sort of have ride the coattails of Catherine Catley, because Catherine did things that I would not have done as an ED. And since then I've done as an ED, because I was like, man, she spent a lot on marketing. What's that about? And I'm like, oh my God, thank God she spent so much on marketing. And it was so eye-opening on how important that was, and how that the brand that I walked into was so solid in Northern Virginia. And so it was really just about making sure that we could expand our access to girls and young women who were interested, but really wanted to be able to access the scholarship. So making sure that we were looking at our price points, and then also bringing in additional contributed income to make sure that we could meet those needs. But I was really, Catherine worked on splitting the 5K into two. And that was a model that, that was my first 5K, is that I was basically shadowing Catherine. And from then on, we just continued to refine it. So it was really about just refining that model and maintaining quality and maintaining our level of participation, and then increasing our access, not just to the girls and the income levels, but also spreading the access out to the corners of Northern Virginia. As we all know, it is massive. It's just a huge footprint. And so really making sure that we were reachable to everyone from Arlington out to Dale City.
Right. Wow. This is really awesome to hear. I think selfishly, it's great for me now as the current executive director to have this story now, because it's a pretty remarkable story to think about that. Rebecca, you started in your townhome with a little baby. I can't even imagine. I have a 1.5-year-old, and I can't imagine getting anything done with him here. We did for a little bit on and off during the early days and I was working from home, but good for you. That is mad props to you for that. But then seeing, you know, how it just grew and took on the popularity and the enthusiasm for the program. Jen, I know you said we were #1 in the country. I'm really proud to announce that we're #2 right now, but out of all the councils, we're still #2 for girls served over our 25 years. And this past fall, we were #2 as well. So we always are in the top 5 of number of girls served per season, but overall we're #2. So I was really excited to hear that and knew that we were 1 for a while. But I love to see that shift, you know, it's interesting to see over about 15 years, we start to shift more into the more innovative practices and what's next for Girls on the Run, you know, thinking about how are we going to handle all the girls and the families at the 5Ks, thinking now we can look about how we're going to diversify our council, how we're going to serve more girls. And then when I came out, my background is victim services. And so I was really excited to look at this program as an early intervention style program and really focus on the social emotional learning and the mental health aspect of the program. So shifting a little bit away from that, we're a running program to we are so much more than a running program. And so it's been really neat especially I started in March of 2020, right when the pandemic hit. And so right then is really when this mental health, you know, epidemic started, and we really needed to focus more on mental health. And so, thank you to all of you for setting us up to where we can focus on. And we are still, Katie, thinking about expansion out into the further corners of our region. Also making sure that everyone has access, regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of their ability, whether they are in a wheelchair, whether they have any type of sensory capacity. We want everybody, regardless of their ability, to be able to participate. So using the foundation that you all set up to get where we are today. So thank you. Rebecca, you touched on this a little bit. So you were instrumental in starting the council. I actually helped start a council in New Haven, Connecticut. So I know a little bit what you were talking about in terms of going and getting trained, but my training was in 2015-ish time. So very different than being trained by Molly Barker. Was there something that sparked you? I know you said you read a blurb. Was there something that made you want to join Girls on the Run or start this chapter?
I believe because my degree and interest in psychology, exercise science, up until this point, I wouldn't really have called myself a runner. I did some running, but I didn't do anything long distance or anything, but I enjoyed being active. And I remember reading that thinking that pulls together everything that I've been working toward that I didn't know I was working toward. Mm-hmm. And so if there's been a calling in my life that wasn't just to say, be a mother, it was to do Girls on the Run. And I just threw everything I had into it. And it just seemed like my name was written all over it. And so in some way, I've been a part of it since then. Once my own daughters were of age, I coached their teams. I coached for many years in Ohio through that. But also, my sister is still working for Girls on the Run. She's just celebrating 10 years. No, is that right? Might be 15. She works in the Cincinnati Council.
I was just talking to Cincinnati earlier today. That's hysterical.
Were you speaking to Regina?
I was not. I was speaking to the ED. They're going to hopefully host a trivia night similar to what we did.
Oh, that would be amazing. Annie is fantastic.
She's awesome.
Yes. But my sister, Regina, actually has worked with Annie for years. So yeah, we were born and raised in Cincinnati. She still lives there and has been doing Girls on the Run. So I regularly have conversations about Girls on the Run, even though I'm no longer coaching in that. So, it's just been near and dear to my heart since day one.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And I love to hear you're still connected. I think it would be hard to leave a Girls on the Run community. And I think that's really what we're trying to do with this, our 25th anniversary. We really want to bring back and bring together our Girls on the Run of Nova community. And so love to hear that you're still in touch. Everyone else, and you can hop in how you want. I'd love to know what drew you to the executive director position, drew you to Girls on the Run, not the executive director position. What was it? Is there something there? Was it something you had always wanted to do? I can say for me, I had heard about Girls on the Run in the 2010s probably, and it was a goal of mine to be an executive director. I just thought it was such a fantastic program. And so for 10 years, I worked on working my way to that stage in my life. And I was involved in many different ways, as I said, starting a council in New Haven, coaching, being a bunny runner of my niece. So when I saw this become available, I was just thrilled to be able to join it. And I will say, and Katie, I don't think she said she remembers this, but at one of the fundraisers, I went up to Katie and said, if you ever are going to leave, I'd love your job. I really just put it right out there, and not knowing about a year and a half later, she was going to leave. So it was perfect. But I really was putting it out in the universe that I was really hoping for her job. So anybody else want to share what drew them?
I should have saved your phone number, because it would have made my resignation letter a lot easier to hand over. I just would have said, but just call this person.
She's ready.
She seems fine. But I do, just to sort of add to sort of putting it out there. I was a coach for Girls on the Run DC. I don't know how I found out about Girls on the Run, but I've always worked in youth development, so I'm sure I just kind of picked it up somewhere. I remember, and I was a coach not for very long, like 1 or 2 seasons, I think. And but I loved it. And then life happened, and I just had to keep going. And then at one point in 2013, I left my position at my job and just wanted to take a break. And I had been an executive director for a local affiliate, sort of similar but different model, but for another organization. And when I left, someone said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to look for another ED position?" And I was like, "Nope, I don't think I want to be an ED anymore, unless, of course, like Girls on the Run was hiring for an ED. Then maybe I would think about it." So I do think that there is something about putting it out in the universe that can help to materialize. But probably 10 months or so into it, the position came up, and I remember talking to the recruiter, and I had known her for some time, and she said, and I lived in DC, and she said, "I actually thought about you for this position, but I didn't think you'd want to commute to Fairfax." And I was like, "Well, I don't." But I do love Girls on the Run, so let's talk about it. So I was happy to do that.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Catherine or Jen, anything?
I had never heard of Girls on the Run, to be honest. And I'm a native of this area, but I was in the corporate world. And what I did was help startup companies get successful. And so I was on a board of another nonprofit, and I was a big runner. And one of my fellow board members said, "I just saw the perfect job for you." And I looked into it, and I've always been really into girl empowerment. So I just jumped in, and it was a perfect fit. I think it was perfect for me at that time of my life. And I think I was a good fit where the organization was at that time.
Yeah, it sounds like you took it from that startup, the entrepreneurial council that Rebecca and Jen had it, and you brought it to the more sophisticated council that it is now.
I just really wanted to focus on sustainability when I was there. Having been on lots of boards of nonprofits, I knew that there were a couple bumps in the road where nonprofits could falter and not be around. And I wanted to make sure Girls on the Run was set up to be around forever. So that was kind of the focus of my years there.
Well, thank you. Jen, anything you wanted to add?
So, I mean, I was very young. And when I look back, I think I was 24 when I was ED. Yeah, I wasn't married, no kids. And now I have two children, married for 15 years. So it's crazy when I look back and think how young I was. But, a lot of people ask the girls, like, that used to ask us as coaches, "Do you wish you had Girls on the Run when you were little?" And when I was looking at the questions that you had sent around, or Sammy had sent around, it's like, no, I was glad I had Girls on the Run as an adult. My mom had passed away when I was 22. So I was in my 20s without like a central female figure. And when I look back now and I think of the women that I was working with and kind of being able to be a surrogate adult figure for some of these girls in the afternoons, and it was just, that helped me get through my 20s. And when I look back now, I'm like, that was my 20s, was Girls on the Run, surrounded by women. And now I'm a mom, and my daughter's 3.5. And all I can think of is, please have this attitude when you're older. You're going to need it. She's very much just, I would say she's the opposite of Sophia, Rebecca. She is like
Okay.
all in, all the time. But it's awesome because it's kind of what I was ready for at the time, and I needed it, and that's what I remember the most. So
I love hearing, since I didn't give myself a choice about this and it was just all in and I'll figure it out as I go. I didn't have all the background in nonprofit. And I just am hearing that we were each there at the time that the program and the organization needed us. And I'm so overwhelmed with joy about that. And the fact that it's still going, it's still strong, it's still big, it's still growing. It's amazing.
I have chills listening to each of your stories. I couldn't have said that better, Rebecca. That it's just amazing how it was meant to be when everybody plugged in, everybody's background or where they were in their life. It just worked. Jen, what an amazing story you have in terms of, using it as your community. I can't say that enough either. I think every adult does say, I wish I had this as a child. But there are a lot of times I'm glad I had it in my life right now because it is such an incredibly supportive community. I'd love just, as we wrap things up, we talk a little, our program is curriculum based. Are there any lessons that you all still kind of think about or with your own children or other youth you're with? That kind of come back even 25 years later that you're like, oh, at Girls on the Run, this is what we talked about, or even within your professional life, because now we're actually doing something called GOTR for Grownups, which we are now doing some lessons for grownups. So I'd love to hear if there's anything that has stuck out to you over these years.
Yeah, I'll go. I have two and I'll make them really quick.
Yeah.
I feel when you, because I need you to.
Yep.
That was one of mine, 100%.
Okay.
I use it with my husband. I use it with my kids. I use it in work. I hope it lasts the test of time. And the other one was putting the toothpaste back in the tube.
That's me.
That's
mine. Yep.
I use that phrase all the time at work, especially. But yeah, those two stuck out, and I think they were so important. And I mean, I first had a son before I had a daughter, and there was so much that I could translate to him just as a parent, through those lessons. So.
Oh, definitely. The I feel statement for sure. The other one I was thinking of, and this kind of came in an iteration when I was back coaching in Ohio, not one of the early versions, but it was the breather, the
stop
roller.
And take a breather.
Yes, that one. That was the other one that I think, oh, that's a regular. That's a regular.
Yep. Stop, breathe, think, respond, and review. Yes, absolutely.
I like the run and scream. I mean, that was
I'm not opposed.
We'll do one and then we do the other.
Perfect.
I think the one that I tap into a lot, and this is a little generic, and I kind of like, it's just star power. And like, I think one of the things that was really important to me at Girls on the Run is like, it's a feminist program, and it was really about like making sure that people and young women were sort of defining their star power and like what femininity meant to them in whatever that meant, whether it's tutus or a Viking helmet, like whatever it is, like two literal things I saw at a 5K. And so, I think those are the things that like, that's your star power. Like that's what you were bringing to this. And I think even now as an adult working with other adults, like it's like when you have disappointment or when something goes wrong or when you don't get the opportunity that you're hoping you're going to get, like it's just not your time. It's just not your star power. And it's okay because you're going to need to provide your star power somewhere else and it's going to come out for you. So I think all of that and the individuality that we were so focused on highlighting for all the girls and the sort of the non-conformity of it all, like I'm like tearing up a little bit. Like it's so critical, as you like walk into some of the challenges of adulthood and adolescence. Like all of that stuff is so important to be able to imprint at an earlier age. And so I'm so glad that I had a part in doing that for more people.
Well,
yeah, I got star power on. I'll never forget getting the curriculum when I started and took it home. I was living in my friend's basement during COVID, and I sat on the couch and I teared up reading the visualization. And I I showed it to her and I was like, Kara, you have to read this. And I'm literally crying on her couch. I mean, it was also COVID, but it was perfect. It's what we need in our lives. Catherine, we only have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure Catherine has a chance to share.
Yeah, as I said, I never coached, but listening to you guys, I certainly remember all those lessons. And Katie, sort of along your same lines, just giving girls permission to feel good about being strong, and that they are strong. And I have a really quick story. One of my last 5Ks, as I said, they had gotten very big, and we had taken all these precautions, and we had all these barricades, and we were out in Gainesville. And believe it or not, during the 5K, a deer jumped over the barricades and ran into a little girl. And we actually had it on film because we had a camera guy there, but her coach was right there with her. And luckily she wasn't hurt. She was knocked down. And when she got up, the coach said, "Are you okay?" And she looked at her and she said, "Yes, I'm a strong girl." And that is Girls on the Run right there. That is right. Whatever comes your way, you can deal with it, and you know it. And so I have a million thoughts about my time there, but that moment was like, yeah, she didn't wilt, she didn't cry. She just got up and kept running.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Gosh, so many chills on this call. Oh my goodness. Thank you all so much for sharing. That's what I often tell my teams that I coach is we can do hard things. And I try to remind people that as they're starting the 5K. This might seem impossible, but you can do hard things. And it's a really great lesson that we're teaching our participants at such a young age. So thank you all so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. And selfishly, it has been so neat, again, to be able to hear everyone's story. I kind of wish I had done this 4 or 5 years ago when I started, and I could have been able to tell our story much better, but now I will. I'll be able to take it with us. I wish we all lived closer. I'd love to go out and get coffee with you all, even a drink, learn more. It's just sparked so many questions. I hate that it's so brief. But thank you to all of our listeners today for joining us. It has been, again, an honor to be able to speak with these legends of Girls on the Run of Northern Virginia. And as we celebrate 25 years of impact, let's not forget that every step taken, every lesson learned, and every life changed was made possible by not only you, 4 fearless leaders, but everyone who has shared in our 25 years in Northern Virginia. So join us in the weeks ahead as we highlight Girls on the Run alumni and where they are now. And thanks for kicking it off, former and my fellow executive directors.
This episode of Joyful Journeys is brought to you by Girls on the Run of Northern Virginia.